All right, we're going to head over to Division II. So Mackenzie, how about you give us a handle on what's going on in the Division II landscape?
So right now in Division II, we are in a quiet period, at least until the end of June. We haven't heard about the rest of the summer. And so what a quiet period means, we can still call, email, video chat with any type of recruit, just like normal. We can also host recruits on campus. We are allowed to have that in-person contact with them if they are at our institution. Same as Mary, even though that's allowed through the NCAA. There are some schools and campuses, depending on their state, going on with COVID, that are closed. So make sure that you talk with your coaches. Division II schools are also allowed to host institutional camps. So that is the only way that we are allowed to evaluate players right now. Even if you were to play in a tournament, if it was in June, we wouldn't be able to attend. It's just on campus. And then there's also been a new interpretation that Division II schools can work other institutions' camps. So if Grand Valley was closed, but Lindenwood University was open, I might have the option to work their camp, so that all regions are fair. And just because your region is closed, you're not penalized more.
Awesome. Cool. And then we're going to go over to Division I. So Kerstin Kimel. Kerstin, where'd you go?
Here, you're on mute, babe.
Sorry.
As you think we'd have the Zoom thing under control by now. Come on.
So, as most of you probably know at this point, Division I sports, in Division I, all sports are under a dead period until July 31st. And the way the NCAA has been operating is that they've kind of been going month to month in terms of how they are looking at extending the dead period beyond July 31st. We don't know. I think we know the NCAA is meeting at the end of the month, or typically middle to end of the month, and we'll look that far ahead. But I was told this week, and I think a lot of us were told by our compliance people, that there are discussions about extending the dead period for Division I all the way to the end of the calendar year in 2020. And the reason for that is, as schools are trying to get their heads wrapped around getting their fall sports back to campus, in particular football first, and then other fall sports. And I'll just speak for Duke. We have about an 80-page report that has been put together, and that is kind of get us all back to campus and get us playing again, and all kinds of new protocols. And the way my compliance director explained it was, and we're not alone. I think that's how all the big universities are operating right now. But there is concern from a priority standpoint of, doing all this work and logistics on campus to keep people safe and playing, and then the optics of letting coaches go off campus and recruit and travel, and then travel back to campus when we're going to be under a lot of restrictions and new protocols on our campus, whether that means teams are actually living together in hotels off campus, or in terms of how we operate with our teams. So that is part of the discussion that is being had, on campuses. And the other piece with that is that it's kind of runs contrary to what these campuses are trying to do, is the idea of bringing people to campus, like for visits. Kind of restricting visitors to campus to our competitors, and not even parents or fans, but strictly just the teams that you're playing against. So those are some of the discussions that are going on in the Division I world. If anyone else on the Division I side of this, let me know. If you have anything different than what I've kind of put out there in terms of what's being discussed on your campus or within your conference.
Awesome. So I think it's just really important for everyone to know as they're coming on, as we look at the different divisions and see what's happening, you're going to get a variety of answers. You're going to get some answers that are obviously less restrictive, some that are more restrictive. A big thing that's come up because of the NCAA restrictions right now, for everyone, Division I, II, and III, I know a lot of people are talking about the tournaments, tournaments that are going on, tournaments that have been moved into August. What does that mean from a college coach's perspective? Thoughts on, again, if there are tournaments in July, we know that Division I coaches aren't going to be able to go, but Division II and III potentially can. Same thing now, all these events are moving to August. So what does that mean, you know, from some of you? I don't know if Janine, if you want to hit on that one first, and then we can obviously kick it around.
Sure. Well, right now, since nothing has changed yet for August, the first 2 weeks are a dead period. So we are not going to any tournaments and not having any contact or interaction. And then the last 2 weeks are a quiet period. And that is where we are able to have institutional camps, but I don't know, each school is going to be a little bit different as far as allowing people to travel and go to an event. So right now, you know, things are still certainly very confusing and very up in the air. But for Division I, we are kind of at the mercy of hearing what's going to happen next, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks with respect to August. There are some different things on the table. Maybe we open the month of August back up, and if recruiting restrictions are relaxed and coaches are able to go and not only host camps, but work different ones or be able to go and recruit at a tournament if that is allowed, I still think there's going to be this pressure and kind of anxiety around then what September 1st might look like. And so are we trying to jam everybody into this 2 week possible period or 4 week possible period? And then is there going to be pressure? People are allowed to talk to Division I coaches in early September to rush to commit because we're just so tired of all the things going on. And I think that's part of why the IWLCA and the NCAA is being so thoughtful is, you know, we do try to have not only certainly the safety, but the well-being of the student athletes as well as the coaches in mind. So that's some of the tidbits that I would share.
Anyone else want to jump onto that one? Everyone's like, no. Meredith, I see you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Just to continue on with what Janine was saying, which she covered a lot, but even if, so let's say we do get, August does open up, there's still the restrictions of some schools budget-wise and travel-wise, which I know have been mentioned before, but like, so remember that, and even if it stays as it is, where we're allowed to host institutional camps, like some institutions may not allow their coaches or anyone to host any camps. You know, I know for a fact there's many institutions, including mine, that are closed for the summer and not allowing any camps at all. So even if we were able, we might not be able, because now we have two forces. We have the NCAA, and then we have our own institutions. So if you are like looking for a specific place or looking for something, or your players want a specific coach there or to go a place, make sure they do their research on reaching out to that institution specifically to know what their restrictions are going to be.
And that's smart. I know you brought up, and Janine, you brought up that September 1st date. For those that are on this call that may not know, September 1st is the first opportunity that Division I coaches have the chance to contact. And by contact, that's for the class of 2022. And that is, well, I don't even know, Kerri Whitaker. Why don't you let everybody know what that means, what contact means?
So when we open up recruiting contact, that is when we are permitted to be in touch with recruits. So we can email them, we can send them letters, we can call them, we can text them, we can have all kinds of contact. That contact also includes hosting official visits and inviting them onto campus in a typical time. And then that contact also allows us to travel off campus and maybe do a home visit with a prospect and her parents. And we could also visit their schools as well.
Cool. How is it going? Like right now, so Mackenzie, in Division II, what are your rules? When can you contact student athletes in 22 class?
Yeah, for the 2022 class, our contact date is still June 15th, so quickly approaching. Again, you know, you could visit that school's campus, you know, for the visit if it was safe to do so in that state at the Meredith's point, you know, if the institution was allowing visitors.
Cool. And then I have a feeling this is a really easy one for you, Mary. What's going on with you guys? When are you allowed to contact prospects in the 22 class?
So obviously, again, there's no NCAA restriction as of right now in terms of any of that. So feel free to reach out and contact. I think that this is a great opportunity to go for each recruit to really hold themselves accountable in this process and find ways to speak to those coaches that they can and reach out.
Cool. So we do have a question in here. It just said, what do you mean by a dead period? How can you reach out in a dead period? So, we said dead period, you can't go off campus, but, why don't we have one of you guys touch on, I don't know if Tracy Coyne, if you want to touch on it, dead period. What can you do in a dead period? Because it seems like you can't do anything, but you actually can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're 2021, obviously you're open to phone calls and emails are permissible, that kind of thing. If you're 2022, then phone calls are not permissible, but you can still email. I think those of us, and you guys can chime in on this, you don't have to email us every week right now. I mean, it's okay to if you have something really significant you want to say, great. But we're getting bombarded with film. And we understand you haven't played for a long time. And there's only so much you can do by yourself. So I think it's okay not trying to send us film every week when you're not doing anything, really. So is that good? Does that sum it up?
Tracy, if I can add,
Yes,
with the 2022s, we can't send emails until September 1st.
Mm-hmm.
If that remains our contact date. We can receive in emails, but we can't send them out unless it's camp or questionnaire. Those are the only things that we are allowed to send during a dead period we can send anything to 2021s, but to 2022s and under, we can only send camp information and a very generic response with a questionnaire.
Awesome. So with that being said, and I'm going to have you, Lindsey Munday, kick this off. Knowing we're in all these restrictions, these dead periods, you can do this, you can't do this. What is recruiting looking like right now in your landscape? What is it? What are coaches doing then? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like everyone, I think it's at times confusing and you feel a little bit of pressure. I think we're all dealing with the unknown right now and getting new information.
2021, they should know by now. I think it's
I'm gonna
2022.
It's current. I don't know where you are.
Sorry. Hey guys, really quick, not to interrupt, but can everybody please mute their screens because people can hear.
Wrong with the background. It's just it's a free thing. It's
whoever that is, could you mute yourself? There.
Found you.
Good job, guys.
Moving forward, yeah. So I'm really talking about the 2022s right now. As we discussed, the 21s. You can communicate. Obviously, visits and things may be different. But with the 2022s, I think coaches, players, are all a little bit in the same boat where we're all trying to navigate this and we're all trying to figure it out. And I think the comforting thing is that we are all in the same boat. We're all dealing with this together. We're all trying to figure out the best ways. And I just want to communicate that, I think us as a coaching body, are really thinking about everything, in terms of August and as we get into September 1, trying to figure out what's best for everyone and putting a lot of thought and discussion and, communication as to what is best for, these student athletes and for us and for really everyone involved. So really right now, yes, we may have seen some people back in November, really, which is a really long time ago. And so I think, again, I can only speak for really myself but, again, I think if we continue on how it is in September 1, I think the process will be moving very, very slow. For at least for me, I know, again, I can only speak for that, but I think we all have to wrap our head around the fact that, it is really important to build relationships and it is really important to see players as much as we possibly can. And right now we don't have that ability. And to Janine's point, we don't want to rush that either. If August, we can have clinics, we also have to think about the safety and, what is best for everyone, even COVID aside, but just the fact that people haven't played in so long, we have to be very, very careful. And again, if everything stands as is, to me, the process is going to be very, very slow.
Liz, can I add something in?
Sure.
Can I add something into that? To go off of Lindsey's point, I think one of our core values in Division I was to have quality evaluations and to take the pressure off of coaches as well as student athletes who are being evaluated. And so we understand that you haven't played and we've had intense discussions about what is the opening date going to look like. And I think everyone, and I feel free to chime in, Kerstin, but I think everyone should anticipate there could be a change to the contact date. I mean, it's just realistic. I know people want, it's like instant gratification. Everyone wants to know now what we're going to be doing. And we're trying our best to formulate a plan that will take in quality evaluations, take off the pressure, allow you an opportunity to play your fall sports, that kind of thing, get your game back on, and, you know, do your research and homework, I think, like Meredith said, about what your schools are doing. But we want it to be fair and competitive. We want competitive equity for everyone. We want travel restrictions lifted, like health and safety is a top priority. There's so many things that we're considering. So it's probably not going to be business as usual. I guess that's what it's been like. It's probably not going to be like that. And I think if we operate under the premise that health and safety is one of our top priorities, I think it'll be better for everyone.
Liz, can I jump in here?
It's your floor, you guys. You guys can
Okay.
jump wherever you want.
So I thought it would be really important. I realize this is just the Division I perspective, but our committee has met probably 3 or 4 times since all of this has happened, and we've had very, very lengthy discussions about the landscape and what's coming and what we don't know, and how, you know, we're at the mercy of the NCAA. And so our discussions have really kind of been based upon, I would say, 6 like big guiding principles. And I thought it would be important to share that with all of you so that you understand the context and how, you know, our committee, look, like Lindsey may feel one way and Tracy may feel another, but our committee's job is to think very broadly about this, and not what's best for our individual programs, but what's best for everybody, knowing that we're not going to be able to make everybody happy, because that is unfortunately the unpredictable nature of what we're dealing with in a pandemic that none of us have ever lived through before. So just to kind of share with you a couple of those points. The first thing, and Tracy touched on this, is safety. You know, we want to prioritize the safety and well-being of both the student athletes as well as our coaches. And we recognize the fact that there are certain areas of the country that are opening quicker than others. And I think that was definitely reflected in the conversations that we had with all of the conferences last week. Conferences that are in areas where they have a lot more freedom, they have different feelings about things than people who are in areas where they don't have as much freedom or there's greater restrictions. But nonetheless, nowhere are we seeing that large scale events are deemed really safe right now. You know, there's people that are picking up this virus when they're at the beach, at house parties. That was stuff that was just on the news tonight. So I think we're thinking first and foremost about safety. And then second, and this was touched on, is the quality opportunities to evaluate and quality opportunities to be seen for student athletes. With no tournaments or camps in the foreseeable future, it's, you know, I think we're struggling with the idea that the student athletes have not had the opportunity to play lacrosse for most of this. They didn't even get a high school season. Most kids, some of the Southern kids did, but most of the kids didn't even get a high school season under their belt. And so, you know, the idea that, like, will we have the opportunity to evaluate well, so that we as coaches can make good decisions, and quite frankly, we can have very honest evaluations with the prospective student athletes, so that they feel like they're on target in terms of the schools and programs that they're considering. The third thing, and I think this is an important thing, are just in general, like, priorities. For us as coaches, a lot of us are looking at the fact that our students are going to be back on campus about, on average, I would say 2 to 3 weeks earlier than normal. And with that, there is going to be a whole host of responsibilities on our shoulders that we've never had to bear before. And that means that, like, just, again, I kind of referenced the 80-page, you know, paper that Duke has put together, our Duke Athletic Department, and the responsibilities that are going to fall on my shoulders and my staff shoulders to kind of logistically, you know, get our kids, like, even just back into the swing of things with school, you know, training, all of that kind of stuff, is really going to be very different. And the way we've kind of talked about that as coaches from a contextual standpoint is, if we had the opportunity to recruit in August, it would be very, very hard for us, because we're talking about our players had their season cut short. They literally all got sent home with like a week's notice. We're bringing them all back to campus, our freshmen, and where should our priorities be in the month of August? And I think there's some difference in opinions, but I would say a lot of people philosophically feel like their priorities need to be on their campuses and with their teams during that time. And with that being said is the issue of competitive equity. We have universities that have had, that are open and they can host camps on their campuses and they can go do things. And then we have some people who have had their budgets cut significantly. They're not allowed to travel on the university's dime. And, it's going to really impact coaches' ability. Like, some people are going to be able to recruit, some people might not be able to recruit. Just like I think there's going to be a competitive equity issue with families. There is, and this kind of takes me to my next point, is the financial impact of all of this. Again, from budget cuts on our end to families who have lost their jobs, who have flat out told us, like, we don't know if we can travel this summer or afford to stay in hotels or be fed. Again, do we have to consider the competitive equity piece for both coaches, programs, and for student athletes in this? And then the last piece, just like our student athletes on our campuses, high school student athletes are going to start the school year off in a way that they've never started off before. And we feel responsible to force them to fall sports and plastic commitments. In other words, some Southern high schools are going to start classes early, just like the colleges are. We feel as though, that still needs to be, like, we're looking for consistency in kind of how we approach this. We've always kind of tried to prioritize, we want kids to be able to play fall sports. So, we originally intentionally designed those 3 weekends in November with the idea that it would not impact high school sports. So those are, just so everybody, and I'm telling, kind of feel free to ask questions, but those are kind of been like our guiding principles, like how we have discussed, all of the potential next steps.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I hate to call someone out, but I'm about to call somebody out. I keep trying to mute your screen. It's not working. So Christina Esposito, if you're on here, mute that screen. No. So I'm going to mute you. Sorry about that. Just trying to help people out. One question that we had, and Mackenzie, I'm going to go to you for this one, because I think that was a lot of thoughts of what's going on with Division I, and there's so many unknowns out there from the college coach's perspective. So let's shift over to the prospects, prospective student athletes. We have a question in here that just says, are there disadvantages or what are you going to say to kids that are in different areas, and some areas are opening up and some areas aren't opening up yet? Do you see kind of competitive advantages, disadvantages from a college coach's perspective? How do you handle that when someone says, well, they live in Indiana and they can play, and I live in, Ohio and I can't? What do you see going on there?
I think, there's more people who cannot play than who can play right now. And so I think even though there might be some tournaments, in the Midwest that are held, I think that's a very, just a starting point. Some coaches might be able to go out and go to a couple of those tournaments and get a base, but I don't think you're going to see players committing, in the summer, in the fall, at as fast a pace as they have before. I think a lot of the times when I think back to our recruiting, usually the coaches are evaluating and then they build that relationship with players. And I think, given the environment that we're in, it might just be flipped. We might spend a lot of our summer as a Division II school talking with players on the phone, getting to know them, talking about what the Division II experience is when they have this time that they're not traveling, not going to camps, and build that relationship first. And then when it is safe for most people to be evaluated, I think that's when coaches will really take those evaluations to heart. I also think, to everyone's point, a lot of people haven't played lacrosse for a long time. And so judging players on a first tournament in July when you've only been doing skill work and you haven't done, big sports, I don't think that's a fair evaluation. And so I think it gives us a starting point, to put recruits on our watch list. But it's the first step in what I think will be a long recruiting process for these couple, recruiting classes, with the 21 class finishing and the 2022 class getting started.
Awesome. Anyone want to join onto that? Or I'm going to move on.
Can I join in, Liz?
Sure.
So I guess the one thing I wanted to emphasize is as you're planning your summer, I don't think anyone should count on August opening up. You know, I think you need to be realistic as much as possible about where we are, not just in the US, but as the world, you know, that way. And not to make anyone scared, but if, like Kerstin made the point at the beginning of the phone call, that there's a good possibility that recruiting will be shut down until the end of December. So if that happens, that's going to push recruiting back. And speaking from I know there's people on this call that July 1st is not necessarily, let's just use that as an example. If it becomes July 1st next summer, that's the first contact date. There's many, many, many good players, probably 2 on this phone call. I don't know, Lindsey, when you were recruited, or Meredith Simon, but there's plenty of good players that were recruited in July going into their senior year. So it might be different for you, but you can look through the history books of all these people that have had amazing college careers when they were recruited on July 1st. So, and then, I don't know, do you want to say anything, Lindsey, about that? Or Meredith, I don't remember.
Yeah, I didn't get recruited until senior year. I don't think I was even contacted on July 1st because I didn't get recruited by all that many people. But yeah, senior year. I was just gonna add just to go off Mackenzie's point a little bit, and the question about obviously a big piece of this is the equity piece that we've talked about in terms of obviously with college coaches, but with players too, as people are mentioning that some can play and some can't. And it just kind of made me think that I know as college coaches, we're talking about wrapping our head around, you know, pushing the contact date back, but let's say it didn't. And college coaches are talking about our process being slower, but I think it's important to advise, you know, the prospective student athletes to slow their process as well, because, you know, let's say September 1 does happen, like not everyone has seen them yet. And I think, you know, if some people can play and some people can recruit, it could end up being very regional. And I think they may be limiting their opportunities, and coaches could be limiting their opportunities if they move forward too quickly. So again, I know as college coaches, we're talking about that. And again, I think first and foremost, everyone wrapping their head around the fact that it could be pushed back. But let's say it's not. I think, you know, not only from college coaches, but the players being, you know, calm enough, and I know it's scary and I know it's different, but they may be limiting opportunities if they were to move forward because, you know, quite frankly, a lot of people have not been seen, you know, by a lot of people yet.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I'm going to shift over, since I guarantee there's a good amount of parents on this. If we're talking about the kids and kind of taking their time and slowing down, so I'm going to kick this to Janine Tucker to give, what would be your advice to the parents of how to help their student athletes in this time period, especially for the 2021 and 2022 class?
Well, first thing I think is just take a breath, right? Because all we want for our daughter is the best, right? So we don't want them to be stressed. We don't want them to be anxious. We don't want them to have anxiety. But to be honest with you, a lot of the skill sets that the recruits, the 2021s or the 2022s are building right now in having to be a little more patient, having to be a little more thoughtful, having to get creative, dealing with change, having to adjust and pivot on the fly. These are all skill sets that we as college coaches absolutely love. And having a strong mindset, being resilient. So these are a lot of the things that the girls are going through right now, and our parents. And as parents, we don't want to bring extra stress to our student athlete. We want to just, I think, keep very calm, continue to let our girls
right now. Yeah.
Oh, Janine, you got muted. Where are you?
That's okay.
Okay.
Let our girls know that there will be a recruiting process. I was one of the old school ones that, you know, went and took my official visits in my senior year and didn't make my decision until the middle of my senior year or you know, into my senior spring. So we're kind of throwing it maybe back old school if dates do get pushed back. But I think also having conversations with your daughter. And also your club coaches. You know, I think if we can all recognize that no one is getting ahead of anyone else. I realize that different regions can open at different times and it may feel that way. And I also think that once somebody commits, it's like bedlam, right? But the majority of people are going to be in a slower process, being more thoughtful, taking their time, developing skill sets that are going to be really translatable when they do get to college, and everyone will find a home. You just have to be, I think, a little more creative. But for our parents, I feel your pain, because that's all I wanted for my sons was the best, and to never hurt, and to never be stressed, and to never be anxious. But those were some of the greatest skill sets that they were able to learn by having to navigate and maneuver through some challenging times. And we're part of something right now that is unprecedented, all of us. And the college coaches, Division 1, 2, and 3, we're doing our best to manage our stress and our anxiety. So please don't think that there's this secret stuff going on that these 12 kids are going to all commit. You know, there's really none of that at all. We are all trying to manage and figure out how to navigate this. And I think Lindsey's advice is excellent. Be thoughtful, take your time, have discussions, open discussions, and just try to remember to breathe. That would be my advice.
Anyone else want to jump into that?
Yeah, I'll chime in to that. I thought those were really great points by everyone that's talked. But I think Janine was talking about being creative, and a question on here on the chat was about, like, should we be filming our practices? And sure, of course, you know, I think anything you can do creativity wise is going to be great, and send it to us, and we'll watch your film of you practicing. We'll watch your film of you doing dodging drills in the backyard. Like, we'll watch your film of something else, maybe playing basketball against your brother in your driveway. Like, we'll watch that film. That might not be the number one way you'll get recruited, you know, but it's helpful, and it's creative, and it's different, and it shows something, and it helps us get to know you a little bit too, because I'm sure you'll show some personality through that film. So sure, the answer to, like, filming practices, I think that's great. And again, I don't think it's like you have to. I don't think you're going to lose out if you don't. I don't think you're going to gain a huge advantage by doing it, but it certainly is creative. It's certainly something you can do, and it's a way to put things back in your control a little bit, which right now everything feels out of your control.
Can I just jump onto that? If you do film practice, to the parents, maybe do not edit out your child making mistakes, because we know at practice your child is going to make mistakes. We want to see how your child responds. We don't want to see someone running around at practice perfect. You know, it's okay. It's like, we live in a real world. We know they're going to come to us and make mistakes. So let it happen and just show a flow. Just make sure we know what their number is. They have the right pinion, whatever, that kind of, you know, that stuff. But we don't need an edited version, or I should say sanitized, if you want to use that word, sanitized version of what practice looks like. So anyway, just throwing it out there.
Can I add something really quick? That I think, like, I'll speak for all of us, like, we all watch film. Like, literally, I think most of us, when we get sent film, we click on it, we watch it. How much of it we watch, how long we watch it probably varies from prospect to prospect and coach to coach. But I think it's a really important point that we will not, and again, if I'm speaking out of turn, coaches, let me know. I don't think any of us will be making decisions about players based on film, you know, in terms of, like, do we like them enough to offer them? Because this is one of the questions in the chat room. Would we, I think the majority of us are absolutely going to insist on seeing kids in person before we make big decisions about offers, and maybe even where kids stand on our list and that kind of thing. So I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, I would add to that, Kerstin, that, you know, when we were talking about earlier today, I said that I thought sometimes film could be helpful to trigger my memory of previous evaluations of a kid, and suddenly, you know, seeing her on video and what she does, oh, now it's all coming back. I totally remember that kid now, in conjunction with the notes I have and the video I'm seeing. But I would never make a decision on a kid at all based on that. That said, I do think it's helpful if they're sending some of that, but it's never something where I would make a judgment on it. It could be, especially for kids that are in a different region, and if this is going to be a more condensed and shorter recruiting process. So when I say a kid from a different region, I just mean from some of those more out of the way, or not, you know, not so much in the hotbeds of recruiting. A kid from Oregon, a kid from, Michigan, you know, the usual suspects along those lines. seeing something like that and seeing a kid excel or really put on a move or something like that, that would certainly be something where when recruiting came around, we would go out of our way to maybe go to one of the whatever to see her, but for sure wouldn't take a kid or put her at the top of the list based on video only.
Can I also jump in and add something to that? You know, when you're in this recruiting process, coaches are essentially trying to find another family member, right? And you as parents and for your daughters, you're trying to find your next family. It's not just what team am I going to go play for? And it's so much more than just the physical talent that you bring to the team. And as coaches, being able to have that contact, being able to have those phone calls, the emails back and forth, the FaceTimes, getting to know your personality, who you are. And that's why I think it's really important not to rush yourself, because the same is true for recruits and their parents to get on a campus or get to know the girls that are going to be surrounding your daughter. And that takes time and it takes a lot of research. And so one thing I would encourage our parents to do who are listening, and club coaches, I would love to encourage you to do this as well. Speak to the 2022s or even your 2021s about, and give them tips on how to interact with a college coach, how to speak to them, how to shake hands, how to make great eye contact, how to carry yourself on campus or carry yourself in those phone calls or those video chats, because there's a tremendous amount that we're making decisions on, not just how many goals can you score and what does your footwork look like on defense. So for me, that's a huge part of the time commitment that gets put into the recruiting process, is learning about the schools and the coaches and their styles. And the flip side, the parents, it's so important for you to learn about who's going to be surrounding your daughter. So maybe take some of this extra time, if we have it, to work on some of those skill sets.
Can I piggyback on that sentiment actually too? Just going back to something I had said earlier of making this your own process. This is an opportunity for these student athletes to really hone in on these schools and learn about them and do their own research without the information being spoon-fed to them by the coaches and by players of those teams. And also use it as a time of self-reflection. What else are you bringing to the table besides lacrosse to these programs? You know, Janine talks about being the member of a family. What are you bringing to that? How are you contributing academically? Are there ways for you to beef up your extracurricular activity resume in this time, given some of the social issues we have going on and other things that are really important to you, whether you're involved in your church or something else? What else are you doing right now? You know, there was something in the chat about diffusing stress. These are great ways to think about something else. Who are you outside of this sport? And how are you presenting a holistic, you know, person or a whole person in this process to the coach that you want to be a part of their program?
I think those are great points. You know, that would kind of lead me into something right now in terms of their own process. Are you guys seeing any differences, whether it's on your own campuses or other campuses, for schools, of making it easier for kids to try to visit your schools? And I say that virtually for many of you, knowing this is going on. Like, are there tools on campuses, virtual tours? Are there things that you're seeing out there of ways that kids can like do their research if they can't pack up and fly, you know, to Maryland, to California, to wherever?
So You Visit, it's youvisit.com, is a great resource, and it has, I think, almost every institution. A lot of, I think even coaches probably don't even know that their school is on it. It's virtual 3D tours of every nook and cranny of their institution. And a lot of schools, again, like I had mentioned on your admissions sites, go to your admission sites for those schools, and there's virtual tours probably already there and provided for you. Maybe they leave out some athletic facilities that you want them to see, which is kind of on us to handle. But for these athletes and recruits, and especially club coaches who want to learn more about these schools, because there's new ones popping up all over the place and all over the country, youvisit.com is a great resource for that also.
Will you throw that in the chat?
Yeah.
That way people can see it. And that's great. You know, Lindsay, go ahead. I know you were going to say something on that.
Oh, I was just looking at the chat. So I know there were a couple questions about the extra year of eligibility, like how it'll affect the recruits, the extra year of eligibility that our student athletes were granted. And I think one, it's going to vary probably at each school. So I think it's important, I think, for the 21s, people may know that answer a little bit more right now, but honestly, and this is just me speaking, but slowing this process down may help us get a handle on the 22s and where that'll be. I can say that, you know, I wouldn't expect like every single person to take their extra year. So I wouldn't go totally in like scared mode that way. But I think it's a great question, and I think it's going to vary at every single school. So that's a conversation that, you know, it's going to be a constant conversation with all the coaches, especially depending on what graduation year. But I can say that I think, you know, from a lot of people that I've talked to with, you know, just even our current seniors, and I know they might be in a different situation, but I wouldn't expect every single person to take that opportunity. So I don't think it's panic mode, but it is a great question, and it will vary from, you know, for every single school and every single graduation year.
Mm-hmm. I do think on that, and maybe another coach wants to touch on it, or you, Lindsey, you know, we're not going to expect all those kids to necessarily come back, but what do you think that's going to mean to roster sizes in general? Because, you know, I feel like one of the questions that coaches are often asked when parents come to sit down is like, okay, I looked at your roster size and is everyone going to play? And they're looking for smaller roster sizes. With this, how do you think that's going to impact some of those roster sizes? What should families get used to seeing? Sorry.
I think, again, that's going to be dependent on every coach. You know, personally, I don't, like, I was, you know, fortunate enough to start a program, and in 1 year we had, I think our highest was maybe 38 or 39. And like, quite frankly, I didn't love that. I love that everyone wanted to, you know, that we didn't have drop off, but, you know, so for me, my philosophy is that I want to keep it at a range that's manageable for me. And so, you know, those fifth years will come into play in terms of our recruiting size a little bit, depending on who wants to stay. But I think each program is just very, very different in that regard. And, you know, it could be changing in the next couple of years if, again, you know, we're being realistic and transparent that, you know, budgets are going to be talked about. And, you know, there was a lot of financial burden on universities, you know, for this. So I think that conversation is going to be ever changing, quite frankly. But again, each school is very different, and each coach is different in terms of how they want to manage their roster.
And that'd be something, go ahead, whoever's, Mackenzie.
Thanks. One thing to think about as well is it wasn't just our seniors for Division II, you know, or for all the divisions who are in that extra year of eligibility. And so, you know, for example, for our freshman class, you know, we can't put that pressure on them right now to decide, do you want to come back for a fifth year that's 4 years away when they only played 4 games and they don't understand what a full year looks like. They might not have even picked their major yet and know the academic implications of that. And so, you know, if you hear from a coach, especially for those younger grad years, and this is going to continue for a couple classes, that they don't know for sure what their number is, that coach is probably being honest with you. I don't think they're leading you on, but they have to let their student athletes try and make that decision of, is it going to be the best fit for them to come back? And so I think that, to Lindsey's point, is why the 2021 class, we have a better idea, because if you're a senior or junior right now in college, it was a little easier to make that decision if you were to come back. And if you're a younger player, you're probably just thinking about that right now, but it's going to take a season or two for you to really have an idea of where you stand with that.
Along with that, so I'm going to kind of hit a real talk, and I'm not sure which coach wants to handle this one, but, you know, with the possibility of student athletes coming back, the realization that, you know, past this year, I don't believe that scholarships are growing. You're not getting more than those 12 scholarships per team in Division I, and not every team is fully funded. And, you know, same thing with Division II with the scholarships. And obviously Kerri Whitaker, the Ivies don't have them, so you're out of this discussion for scholarships. But how does that impact? You know, what from a parent perspective, when obviously we're in kind of a financial uncertainty time period, how does that impact? How does that decision kind of impact you guys with the scholarship question?
I'll take that one. Well, I'll
daring.
start, and I think like Lindsey's kind of talked about how every school is going to approach this differently. Mm-hmm. But my feeling is that I don't I personally don't know a lot of coaches who would have the 2021's scholarship offers be impacted by fifth-year seniors returning. Some schools may extend, I actually think they may, let me back up. I don't foresee that being a huge issue, but I think for 21s who are committed, who have offers, they should probably talk to their coaches and ask if that offer still stands. I think most of our coaches would have a really hard time ethically adjusting those offers based on the fact that they're going to have kids come back for a fifth year. And I'm saying that based on discussions I've had with my friends in coaching. But I think there could be coaches who, say, hey, listen, if I can take some of your money as a freshman and give it to someone who's coming back, I will double you up like the following year. If I'm being very honest, I think some of those discussions can go on, but I think that that's a conversation that people should have with the coaches of the schools they're committed to.
Anyone else want to hit on that, or we're good? All right. Well, Kerri, I am going to put you in front of the bus since you don't have to deal with scholarships over there in the Ivy Leagues. There is a question on here about leniency with ACT, SAT testing. What about transcripts? Where do you guys kind of see from this perspective, from what you're hearing from schools, or what advice could you give when it comes to, the academic component? Since some kids couldn't take SATs or ACTs, are you hearing about things across your divisions and your conferences? Like, how's that all going?
Yeah, we are. As everyone probably knows, the SAT testing service just recently announced that maybe that home SAT test idea wasn't a great idea after all. So that is bonanza of an opportunity for September is gone. Penn, and I'm just going to, say this specifically because I know this because our admissions just told us. I was a little bit surprised. Sorry for the background noise here. I was a little bit surprised about this, but they are going to be testing optional for this cycle and this class, which obviously makes their job as admissions officers that much harder. Obviously, I think kids are still going to do everything they can to test to get into highly competitive schools. What does that mean for us? Well, that doesn't apply to student athletes. So the kids that we're looking at and we would be recruiting still have to present those tests. For the first time ever, though, they being our admissions office, has said to us that they would look at PSATs. That's something that's never been considered or factored in before, but so many test dates, what was it? So March, May, June, September, like so many have all been canceled. So, and opportunities to push deeper into the summer have all been basically nullified. So that is one thing. I don't know if they will make accommodations on some super scoring, but I do think there is super scoring basically mean taking apart your test pieces and taking your best parts from different dates, whatever they are, and rolling them all together for what's called a super score. I think they are showing some flexibility, in that regard. So I'll kind of stop at that. If there's more questions or people want to know more, throw it in the chat. But that's my understanding right now.
Mm-hmm. And that is something good for people to know, is that they need, again, whether it's conversations with coaches or going on the NCAA.org webpage to find out a lot of that information. On our own webpage, IWLCA.org, we have a recruiting section, and we're guiding you to the NCAA pages and places for information. You're just gonna have to do a little bit more homework. We'd say that for the families out there. A question, and I don't know who wants to tackle this one. It's not a heavy hitter, but it's just, there's a great question here about high school coaches. The high school coaches didn't get to even work with their student athletes in the spring. How can they help? How can they be a part of this process when they weren't there? Like, what do you guys, when you're talking to a high school coach, what do you want to hear from them? Because they didn't get to watch their student athletes compete. Who's jumping on? I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus.
I will.
Okay.
I think what we want to hear the most is the truth, like an honest conversation. Because I think if we're going to take someone from your program, we want to have the trust in your evaluation. We trust you as a person who's known them for several years to give us the honest, you know, feedback on, you know, what are they like as a player? How do they interact with their parents? What are their parents like? Do you think they have the mental like toughness to hang at the Division I level? Like, where do you see them? What have they done for you? You know, how are they off the field? What kind of a teammate are they? Like, we need honest feedback so that we can make the best decisions for our program. And what we want the student athlete to be successful and have a positive experience wherever they end up. So I think it's really, really important to be honest and, you know, talk in a fair way, but I guess I keep going back to honest, but I think that's it, right? Tell the truth. It always works better.
Here.
Something like, I think it's important. I think that sometimes the high school coach, especially if they're a teacher in the school, can give a perspective that's different than the club coach. And I think that is a really important perspective in terms of how that student athlete is perceived in school, what their character is like. And I'm not saying the club coaches can't give you some gauge of that, but I think that, you know, by and large, you know, we want to hear, it's not just about how we can, if we have a good opportunity to evaluate them, I think most of us can see how fast they are, potentially what kind of impact they can have in our program, all of that. But we also want to know what kind of kid they are and what kind of family they're coming from. And sometimes the high school coaches can give us a way better indication of that than club coaches, which is why it's important that we do, you know, in our process, reach out and talk to those high school coaches to get that information.
Cool. Anybody else? Awesome. A question just came in, and I think it is something that we want to hit on just a little bit more. I know we talked about video in the past, and we're going to go back to that. Now with new mediums, I know there's more things going on Instagram, that we do have more events that are being filmed and being sent. And so we do have a question as to, you know, do you look at like lacrosse accounts on Instagram as new ways to watch players? You know, do you find that there are different ways that players can showcase themselves outside the norm that maybe they haven't seen yet, they don't know about, or ways that have come into your purview?
I can kind of touch on that a little bit, but maybe from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
Social media can tell a lot about a recruit and a person. And I think that something we talk to our team a whole lot about is to make sure that anything that you're putting out there on social media, whether it's your lacrosse skills or a wonderful service opportunity you have, or you know, whatever you retweet, it's like you said it, right? So I think with social media, it's a really kind of good topic for the parents and the club coaches and the high school coaches to speak to the girls about, because that is a reflection of you. And if you say or put something out there that's not appropriate, you know, I believe a lot of college coaches look at social media accounts and can tell a lot about a person and a player. It's not the be all end all by any stretch, but if there's some pretty interesting stuff getting put out there or inappropriate, there's way too many other players out there that coach will move on to. So I do think it's a cool platform. I will tell you right now, go to the Team USA players and look at their accounts, and a lot of the coaches put out great content, you know, to help you improve as a player. And I've loved seeing some of the stick work things that people put out on social media, but the flip side is also true. Be really careful how you're representing yourself on social media.
Totally. On that, and this is actually something that's come up with some different people, and I'm going to start with you, Mary, from a Division III standpoint. You're seeing all this stuff about virtual camps, you know, virtual camps for prospects, virtual camps for younger kids, for coaches. Right now we're all living in a world of virtual. So for you, you know, we'll start at the Division III level. So Mary, what can you do virtually? Can you do virtual camps and clinics? Can you do, and what age groups can you do them for? So let's get the D3 in there.
You can do virtual camps and clinics, and you can do them for any age group as of right now. I think that they are a great resource to tune in. I know that there were some NESCAT coaches that were holding them, I think before this announcement came out, before the June 30th, you know, legislation or whatever they did for their conference. But I think it's a great opportunity for you to be able to also ask questions to those coaches in those forums, if that's another avenue for you and you're having trouble getting to those coaches because they're not in the office, or some coaches are technically furloughed for whatever reason. You know, there's a number of benefits to being able to jump on some of those things. And I think, again, you need to make sure that it's cost effective if there is a fee for doing them that works for your family. And I think it's up to those coaches too to recognize that we're doing the best we can offering opportunities, and that those opportunities shouldn't necessarily be indicative of where this person is, you know, for you, you know, playing wise right now. I think, again, going back to Janine's point about we're all being patient. We're trying to offer them the best that we can in terms of exposure and FaceTime with us legally. But it's up to the families to decide whether or not they can handle the financial commitment to some of that, and if that works for them.
Awesome. What about for you, Mackenzie, in Division II? What are you guys allowed to do or not allowed to do from a virtual standpoint?
Division 2 is the same as Division 3 right now. Any virtual camps, as long as they're open to all and not, you know, restrictive, they're still allowed. I will say there have been some institutions that are cautious of doing virtual camps because of the liability of, you know, if somebody gets injured, you know, if somebody, you know, is maybe overheated, you know, what's the support system around them, because we can't call an athletic trainer, you know, over a Zoom session. And so I think that has been some of the hesitation, at least from the university versus people who run their own camps through LLCs, about doing those as a, you know, Grand Valley lacrosse camp or whatever your institution is.
Cool. Kira, what about from Division I?
Virtual camps are allowed from a Division I standpoint, but I think it honestly depends somewhat on the institutions and whether or not they're letting you do that, especially if you're somebody who has a camp with your institution's name in it. People may allow it, but like at certain places, you may have to remove your institution's name from a virtual camp.
And are there restrictions on the age of who you can, and I know Janine, you're also shaking your head on this one, just in terms of the age of who you guys can do camps with?
Yes, I was under the impression, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that Division I coaches are only allowed to do virtual camps with middle schoolers, not high schoolers. So there is a restriction on the age that you're allowed to work with.
That's correct.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, just based on a couple of the comments in the chat too, but, and this might be a little bit of just like my opinion, but, you know, again, we live in a virtual world right now. And I think, you know, these, you know, camps or opportunities to learn and get better, if that's what players want, are awesome, right? Like, it's always a great thing to want to, you know, push their game and all the rest. But I know a couple of questions, like I know that there is feeling of pressure, you know, to attend these August things, or saying that coaches are definitely going to come in that quiet period right now with the last 2 weeks. And then, you know, people are feeling pressured to, one, financially, you know, to pay the money, but to get in front of these coaches. And I think, again, I'm not going to advise anyone on what to do, but I think just know that all of these dates and, you know, all of these conversations are happening, and we are, you know, taking all of that into consideration in order, you know, to alleviate that pressure and alleviate that financial burden and all the things that Keir kind of laid out in the beginning. But I just know that a lot of those things are popping up, and you know, it comes with a little bit of pressure to say, like, coaches are definitely going to watch all this film, so pay this money to come to this camp. And I just think there's a fine line. Again, like, doing this stuff to get better and because you want to play lacrosse, like, I think is awesome. And I do think it'll help, you know, us be able to see some kids and whatnot. But I just think it's a little bit of a fine line, and we're still getting information, and, you know, we're trying our best to, you know, get information as quickly as we can, but it's not how this process is working. And so, you know, all those things are being considered is just kind of what I wanted to put out there.
Cool. With that, I wanted to give the opportunity for each coach just to, again, if there are thoughts that you have, you know, in general, whether it's a piece of advice, whether it's just thoughts for, and I know we have everything from high school to club to parents to players on here. So just, if you have any advice, you know, we can kind of just kick through. Once you do it, send it to somebody else. Meredith has told us that she has really poor internet, so she's only hearing half of what we're saying, so she can't speak. That's why Meredith has been very quiet. But, you know, I don't know if I'm looking at you, Janine, so why don't you get it started?
Okay. I think the biggest thing for everyone is, and that I've learned, is to just be a lot more empathetic to the fact that we're all in this storm together, but we're absolutely not all in the same boat. And I think that we have to recognize that there are student athletes that have different ways of being able to either video or find a place to work out. There are college coaches who have different restrictions than others. And I think just being a little more empathetic, not being a part of the frenzy, I think would be a huge bit of advice that I would love to give to everybody listening, is to try to stay calm and recognize that coaches will fill their classes, and try not to be a part of the frenzy, but a part of, we got this, we're going to get through this together, we're going to do things for the right reasons, and everybody will find a home.
You can kick it to someone.
Oh, Lindsey, you go, girl.
You're going back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be a lot of the same things said. I mean, I said it at the beginning, but it's tough. We all know that it's tough right now, and for a variety of different reasons. But I think the one thing I can say is that, the decision that someone makes to go to school to play, lacrosse is a really, really big one, and, has lasting, impact. And I think, more than ever, taking your time and understanding, sort of the gravity of that decision is really important. And I think, again, to Janine's point, everyone will find a home, and we'll all navigate this new normal, and it will be okay, but just really try to avoid, the frenzy, which is hard. I know that it's hard, but, the decision's really important. And I think from both sides, we have to, do our best to, to take our time with this.
Cool. We'll move down the road. I see Kerri. I'll go to Kerri. No, you're good. I'll go to Kerri.
I think, yes, the photo bombing, I know. I think, let's be realistic, people. There's not going to be recruiting in August. That's my CDC opinion, okay? So be realistic about what's happening. And I get it, like, reality has slapped you in the face so many times over the last 3 months. I think a thing to do is, like, one of the things that our staff talked about is, like, it's not going to be a perfect recruiting cycle, and we're going to miss kids, and we will probably make some mistakes, but we're going to work hard, and we're going to do our best. I think as parents and as coaches and as prospects, I would focus personally on what are the things I can control right now. And so that's really something that I would focus on. I would try to do some of my research on schools. I would be honest. I would ask for my club coaches and high school coaches to be honest about what's my ability level. I would try to look for programs that I was interested in. I would be checking out their Instagrams, their Instagram stories, try to get a different feel for the places. I would use this time to, there's all these hours in a day, do some like SAT prep. And then I've heard some coaches say, like, if you've got a stick and ball and you're kind of alone right now, or you've got all this time and you can't have a summer job or whatever it is, like, you could work on your stick skills, and it will show who did and who didn't, and we'll know. So those are some things.
Still going on.
Pardon?
You're good.
Okay, so I would say I would focus right now on what are the things that I can control in this process.
Awesome. Mary, what about for you?
I'm just kind of going back to not only what you can control in this process, but making sure that if you don't have access to coaches for whatever reason, you're reaching out to those institutions, finding out if they're test optional, find out if their admissions department is open and you can get FaceTime with someone, find out if their campus is open so you can drive through and see it. Make this process your process and not so much of the process between you and the coach.
Awesome. Meredith, you said we have you, so I'm going to use you. What do you got?
Yeah. Everyone said great things, but in addition, just once it's allowed, like you're of the age where you can ask questions, and to the coaches, don't be afraid to ask a question, even a tough question. Like, how many people are any of your seniors returning, or your juniors returning, and do you have spots available, and what number spots, and are you recruiting a midfielder like me, or whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. We appreciate that communication, and if we're allowed, we'll answer those questions, and most coaches will answer all those questions for you. So definitely just don't be afraid of like asking that like question that might be a little bit weird. Do you have scholarship money? Whatever, ask it, because we want to help you guys out as best we can.
And that's awesome. How about for you, Mackenzie?
Well, Kerri took my focus on what you can control, but the other, I guess, advice I would say is I think during this time, your self-accountability is really going to show. And so if you can kind of develop some of those habits of, you know, I'm going to run 3 days a week, or I'm going to look at the Shake School Instagram and find a new drill to do, or read a book about the growth mindset. You know, that doesn't mean you need to spend 5 hours a day trying to be the best student athlete possible, but, you know, starting to set small goals and actually follow through with those. I think if you can develop that habit now with all of this uncertainty, those are skills that are going to transfer very well to once you do get to college and help you have a really successful career as a player, but also, you know, really succeed academically.
Awesome. How about you, Tracy Coyne, out there in nature?
I noticed a comment in the chat that I wanted to kind of address, which was they wish that women's lacrosse would take a stand. We have. I mean, we had the courage to step up and cancel our tournaments way before anybody else. And what that says is we're putting the health and welfare and safety of parents and student athletes and coaches ahead of anything else. So that was a proud moment for us as an organization. I also think we've taken a stand in how we push back the recruiting process, which has allowed everyone to gain some sanity and to have some perspective and to change your mind. Like freshman year in high school, you might think you want to go somewhere. By junior year, you think you want to go somewhere else. So I think that we can't legislate what's going on the club level. But I think if you listen to what we're saying, it's that we're trying to take our time so that we can so that we have effective evaluations. We're allowing you an opportunity to work on your game so you can be at your best. And we know that after 2 weeks in August, you're not going to be at your best because you haven't played for 8 or 9 months. So I think if we look at from the long haul, like thinking like, what am I going to look like next spring after I've had a season? You know, I think it might be, everybody needs to just calm down. I know it's hard for us because we're all going a million miles an hour, but I think this is a time where we need to have perspective about realistically where you are as an athlete and where you are as a student, and just be okay with waiting, which isn't how it usually works when you have 392 TV channels and you can flip through it, and you don't like something, you can go to the next one. But I just think I'm proud of our organization. I'm proud of a lot of the work that the coaches have done because we're leaders. You know, we are not afraid to take a stand. And so what we're saying is there's no pressure right now because you can't really do anything. And you need to put social distancing and your health first versus trying to gain a spot on a team that's not ready to make offers on September 1. That's what I got.
That's what you got. Cool. Kier, you're on mute. Kier, you're on mute.
Sorry. My crew is, I have people walking in from doing things. So my big thing, and this is going to sound, you know, very cliche, is just to be patient. And I think to trust us that we're trying to do what's best for everybody. I think I have a lot of confidence in our committee. I think we represent big schools, small schools, public, private, north, south, east, west. I think that we're very, very, very thoughtful in this whole process. And we are going to, and again, I say all this knowing that we ultimately don't have the final say. All we can do is just try to, you know, when the NCAA asks us for feedback, we'll give them feedback. And, but we don't have ultimate control over what the decisions are going to be. And with that, the only other piece of practical advice I would say is that from, you know, if you want to try to make some headway from a recruiting standpoint, outside of what everybody else has said about virtual tours and working on your game and all those things, if you really want to start thinking about schools, I think probably everybody could say they, you know, I shouldn't say everybody, but, you know, you maybe within a short distance, you could somehow get yourself to a city school, a school that's in the suburbs, and then a school that is kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and just walk around on campus. Most campuses aren't closed for that kind of activity where you can just walk around and see it and check it out. because that's a big part of the whole process, is figuring out maybe kind of what kind of environment you want to be in. And even though there aren't students on campus right now and there's very little activity, you still might get a sense of like, do I want to be in a big, you know, urban area, or is a suburb better for me, or am I comfortable being, you know, kind of out there? I think those are things that probably could get done right now from a practical standpoint to let people start getting a head start on recruiting for themselves.
Awesome. You know, speaking for myself and for all of our coaches, one, thank you to all of our coaches for taking, you know, this evening to talk to everybody. I think it's been huge. Something that's really important, as with the coaches and the families we have on there, that I hope you guys are hearing, will wait. These coaches will wait. They want you to prioritize your health and your safety. So as you get back on the field, whether it's in practices, if competition starts up, you know, there are a lot of people putting things out, return to play protocols from the U.S. Lacrosse, from the high schools, from your state and local government. We really do encourage everyone to follow those. This is about your health and safety, because the game will wait. The organized game will be there when it's safe to be there. So whenever that is, it could be very soon for some places in the country. It could be longer. But again, this is where we're asking everyone to make smart decisions and take care of your families, take care of your clubs, and just make those great decisions, because again, that's what our coaches are looking to do. Obviously, everyone's always looking for recruiting advantages. I've been so impressed with all of our coaches with how they're working together and how they're saying what's best for the sport, what's best for the game, what's best for you as student athletes and coaches. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. This will be recorded and on our IWLCA recruiting page, which also has, if your parents are on here, we have the parenting through the process still on there, as well as our first town hall, which might have things how they've changed over a month since the first one. But we want to say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. As we get more updates, we will continue to update you. We will make sure you know what's going on, what's happening in this process as best we can. And our coaches, I think, like I said, are doing an awesome job. So I'm very proud of all of them. They're great people. Thank you guys so much for this evening. And again, stay healthy out there, people. All right. Have a good night, everybody.